Fruits you didn't know were illegal to grow in America. If you've ever walked into a nursery, picked out a fruit tree because you liked the way it looked, and assumed you were free to plant it anywhere in the country, you're about to find out that's not actually true. Somewhere in the United States right now, there's a backyard fruit tree that's perfectly legal 3 states over and completely banned where it's standing. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which 7 fruits have crossed that line, why they crossed it, and which one of them sparked a federal manhunt that lasted almost 100 years. Before we get into it, if you're the kind of person who likes knowing the hidden side of gardening, the stuff most channels never mention, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because we dig into stories exactly like this one every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with the tree you've probably walked past 100 times without ever suspecting a thing. Every spring, in neighborhoods across America, a certain tree explodes into bloom almost overnight. White flowers cover every branch, so dense and so uniform that the whole tree looks like it was carved out of a postcard. That's the calorie pear, usually sold under the name Bradford pear, and for decades it was one of the most popular ornamental trees a homeowner could buy. Cities planted them along sidewalks. Developers planted them in front of new subdivisions because they grew fast and needed almost no maintenance. Then people started noticing the smell. Residents compared it to rotting fish, and honestly, that turned out to be the least of the problem. Underneath all those flowers, the tree was quietly producing small, bitter pears loaded with seeds, and birds love them. They eat the fruit, fly off, and drop seeds everywhere they land. Within just a few years, abandoned lots, fence lines, and roadsides started disappearing under dense thickets of thorny pear saplings, choking out the native trees that used to grow there. New Jersey banned the sale and planting of calorie pear outright. So did Ohio. A tree that cities once handed out for being low maintenance is now the same tree crews get paid to rip out. But here's where it gets interesting, because trees weren't the only thing the government once pushed on homeowners and quietly regretted later. Picture a farmer in the early 1900s being handed free plants by a soil conservation agent and told this is the answer to your fence problem. That's exactly what happened with the multiflora rose. It was cheap, it grew fast, and its hips, the small red fruit left behind once the flowers fade, were even used for jam and tea. Farmers planted it as a living fence, and for a while, it worked beautifully. Then it stopped behaving like a fence and started behaving like a flood. A single multiflora rose can produce up to 1 million seeds in a single year, and those seeds can sit in the soil for decades before sprouting. It now blankets pastures and forests across the East Coast and the Midwest. Pennsylvania and Virginia eventually classified it as a noxious weed, illegal to plant on purpose. The same agency that gave it away for free ended up spending decades trying to undo what it started. If that sounds ironic, the next one takes that irony and doubles down on it, because this time the fruit is being sold to you as a health food. Autumn olive produces small red berries that are genuinely loaded with lycopene, the same antioxidant found in tomatoes, and foragers love it for exactly that reason. You'll find it praised on wellness blogs as an overlooked superfood hiding in plain sight. But the same trait that makes it spread fast in the wild makes it dangerous in a backyard. Autumn olive can take over an entire field within just a few growing seasons, changing the chemistry of the soil in a way that gives it an unfair edge over everything else trying to grow nearby. Massachusetts has banned its sale. So has Ohio. So has Maine. So somewhere right now, someone is harvesting a superfood off a plant their own state has quietly made illegal to sell. Now, here's a question for you, and I'd genuinely love to know the answer in the comments. Have you ever picked a wild berry on a hike, or even in your own yard, just because it looked safe, or because you saw a bird eating it first? Because that exact instinct is about to get a lot more complicated. Common buckthorn produces clusters of dark berries that look almost exactly like blueberries. Birds eat them constantly and spread the seeds everywhere they land. But in humans, those same berries act as an aggressive laxative, capable of causing severe vomiting and dehydration within just a few hours of eating them. Combine that personal risk with the same overwhelming spread problem we've already seen twice, and it's no surprise buckthorn is now banned for sale and planting in states from Minnesota all the way to Massachusetts. And speaking of fruit that can put you in a hospital bed, the next one isn't some obscure backyard weed. It's famous. It's beloved. It's literally a national symbol in another country, and it's still heavily restricted here in America. Ackee is Jamaica's national fruit. It's the centerpiece of ackee and saltfish, a dish so iconic that people travel specifically to try it, and the tree itself grows just fine in parts of South Florida. Here's the catch: unripe ackee contains a toxin called hypoglycin A, and eating it before the fruit has naturally split open on the tree can cause severe vomiting, seizures, and in serious cases, death. Cooking it doesn't fix the problem either. The toxin survives heat. Because of that risk, the FDA treats fresh ackee as essentially banned from import, and even canned or frozen versions are only allowed in from manufacturers who've proven, plant by plant, that they can keep toxin levels low enough to be safe. One of the most beloved fruits in the entire Caribbean is something most Americans will never get to taste fresh, simply because the margin between delicious and deadly comes down to timing. So if a fruit that famous can carry that much risk, you have to wonder, what was hiding in a fruit so unassuming that almost nobody remembers it even existed? That brings us to the gooseberry. It belongs to the same plant family as the final fruit on this list, and that one fact got it caught in a legal mess that some states still haven't fully let go of, decades later. To understand why, you need to understand what the federal government was actually afraid of, because this next part isn't just a footnote in gardening history. It's one of the largest plant eradication campaigns this country has ever run. In the early 1900s, foresters discovered a fungus called white pine blister rust that was killing off America's white pine forests, and at the time, white pine was the backbone of the entire timber industry. Here's the twist: the fungus couldn't survive on pine trees alone. It needed a second host to complete its life cycle, and that host was the black currant. So in 1911, the federal government didn't just discourage growing black currants. It banned them nationwide, then funded an eradication program that, at its peak, employed more than 8,000 workers ripping currant bushes out of the ground by hand, across more than 20 million acres of American land. Homeowners were ordered to destroy their own bushes. The campaign ran for decades, costing the equivalent of roughly $1 billion in today's money, and it worked almost too well. Black currants are so rich in vitamin C that Britain built an entire wartime survival drink around them when German U-boats cut off citrus shipments during World War II. And yet here in America, the fruit all but vanished from memory. Even after the federal ban lifted in 1966, individual states kept their own versions of it going for decades. New York didn't legalize black currants again until 2003, and that only happened because an American farmer named Greg Quinn spent years convincing state lawmakers that the danger to the timber industry had been wildly overstated. New Hampshire still restricts black currants today. An entire generation of Americans grew up never tasting a fruit their own grandparents likely grew in the backyard, all because of a fungus most of them have never even heard of. So what connects all 7 of these fruits? The pear nobody suspected, the rose the government handed out for free, the superfood berry, the toxic look-alike, the national treasure of an entire island nation, and the quiet currant that triggered a 100-year manhunt. Every single one of them was introduced with good intentions. For beauty. For food. For erosion control. For protecting one industry from a disease nobody fully understood yet. And every single one eventually became too aggressive, too costly, or too dangerous to leave alone. Here's the real takeaway, and it's the one thing worth remembering long after this video ends: something perfectly legal to plant in one American state can be heavily restricted just a few hundred miles away, not because anyone's trying to punish gardeners, but because the regulations are protecting different farms, different forests, and different communities depending on where you're standing. So before you bring home a fruit tree you've never grown before, it's worth spending 5 minutes checking your state's agricultural regulations, because as you just saw, ordinary and legal aren't always the same thing. If this kind of story is exactly what you come here for, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more hiding in plain sight in American backyards than most people realize, and we're going to keep uncovering it. In fact, if 7 fruits can quietly cross the line into restricted territory, you have to wonder what else is sitting in gardens right now that hasn't been caught yet, and that's exactly what we're digging into next.